Hello and welcome to this episode of Haunted Histories with yours truly, Penny Griffiths-Morgan. My guest, as anyone watching this on the little tidbits video will see, my guest this week is the gorgeous Kate Cherrell from Burials and Beyond. She's nodding her head if you're listening to this rather than watching it. Hi Kate, thank you for joining.
Hello. Oh, thank you very much for having me.
No, you've been on my wanted list for a while, I have to be honest. I always feel a bit embarrassed asking people to come on the show though, because I sort of almost expect everyone still to go, nah, but nobody ever...
Oh no, nonsense. I was really excited to be invited. Really? Yeah, oh, absolutely, yeah.
Thank you so much. Oh, I'm blushing. So you're known as kind of the Victorian death person, I suppose would be a way of describing you. I mean, you've just said that you've got an article being published in Amanda Woolmer-Limpert's new book, Female Macabre Volume 2. You and I both write for Haunted Magazine on a regular basis. You have your own webpage, Burials and Beyond, which you put some absolutely fascinating blogs on. I think I shared one recently on Haunted Histories about the graves that are on the side of a cliff.
Yeah, hanging coffins and burial caves of it's pronounced Lumiang. It's in the Philippines, but interesting burial practices, really.
It's fascinating. I have to ask, how did you find out about those hanging coffins?
So I think pretty much the same way that I find out about any kind of strange burial practices, which is that I'm just constantly reading if there's a book out on, someone's journey around the world visiting burial sites, if there's an article somewhere about that just even has coffin or death in it, I'm on it. I'm on it like a terrifying raccoon. I'm just sort of constantly scouting. But I think I'm one of those people, much like yourself, I'm kind of a natural researcher, although quite often I say I'm a natural nosy person.
I say that too. I'm naturally nosy. It helps.
Yeah. So if there's, if I see a picture of a coffin on the side of a cliff, I'm gonna know about that by the end of the day, because I won't be able to focus on anything else. So it's nice in some ways, but in other ways it leads me to be very unproductive a lot of the time.
Yeah, and I find with me it makes me quite antisocial, because I'll be Googling stuff and then reading up on something else and then reading up on something else, and I constantly have books coming through the post that I've ordered. And 4 hours in, my husband will be like, are you actually going to eat your dinner as it's gone cold sitting next to me, because I've got sort of so engrossed in the, like you say, the rabbit warren that you've gone down. So I do, I get that. I do get that. Yes. Researcher come nosy git. I mean, they're kind of one in the same thing, aren't they? So where did your fascination with all things Victoriana and mourning and death come from?
I think it kind of came from two directions. I think my love of cemeteries really came first, because I grew up visiting my local cemetery twice a week with my granddad. And so I kind of gained this interest in gravestones, burial symbolism, just from a very childish perspective, when you see things on face value. And then also with it sounds very glib and dismissive when I say this, but I don't, it's from the goth subculture that I got into when I was, a young teen. And a lot of the aesthetic and a lot of the wider interests and literary interests of the goth subculture are very firmly Victorian based. So when you enjoy it at surface level, it's wonderful. But then when you get a bit deeper and you start joining it with your interest of cemeteries, it just naturally leads you into mourning practices, social history. And I think because I'm a bit of a magpie anyway, I'm a very girly girl at heart. So when you get into jewellery and clothing and things like that, trinkets, I just have to research it, have to look at it all. And so it's all snowballed, as you said, it's like a rabbit warren. You find an interest in one aspect of Victoriana, and then before you know it, you're surrounded by other people's hair and, you know.
Onto the hair thing in a second.
Yeah.
So would you call
hair
yourself a
whatnot.
taphophile? Taphophile, is that the right way of pronouncing it?
I've never heard it spoken.
You're not.
I think it's taphophile or taphophile.
Taphophile. For those who know, someone who's intrigued by graveyards and cemeteries and stuff, and I have always been one ever since I say knee high to a grasshopper. I remember at about 6 or 7, the little village my parents still live in, the WI did a project one summer to clean up a lot of the graves so they could log them all. And I was there with my scrubbing brush, scrubbing the graves so we could log them all. And I just spent hours going around, like looking up the people's names and what age they died. And when you get whole families of them. And then as I got older, I started to realize the events, you know, there was a TB outbreak or something like that caused it's. Yeah, I don't find graveyards and cemeteries scary at all. A lot of people, you know, because where we went to, my husband and I went to Bosworth Hall recently, and the pub we went to for dinner, they said, oh, it's quicker if you cut through the church graveyard. And I was like, yeah, that's cool. And my husband's a bit like, a graveyard in the dark? Are you nuts? And I'm like, less active than anywhere else, to be quite honest. I find quite relaxing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in cemeteries, graveyards, burial spaces, what you've got to be worried about is the living. You know, I've worked in I worked in a cemetery a few years ago, and I was there at all hours of the day and night, you know, on my own or just with a flashlight, you know, and they're very peaceful places. And you know, when you're working there or as a visitor, it's like, it's a free museum. It's a free art gallery. It's a free social history museum.
Oh, I like that.
They're wonderful places. But this idea of the spooky graveyard it's something that's never really attached to me either. I'd feel more comfortable cutting through a cemetery than I would cutting through, you know, a big row of bars on a Saturday night. You know, I know where I'd feel safest.
Yeah, me too. I get you. I'm completely in agreement now. They've never worried me at all. And you know, when people sort of go ghost hunting in graveyards and cemeteries, I almost don't bother, because I think they're about the most inactive acts. Although saying that, there is one in Essex that the church itself burned down in 1970 something, and I was the church itself is meant to be quite active, and I went there to do a recce on it because I've wanted to visit it for ages, and I was just walking around the graveyard and I felt like I was directed to these war graves, World War I war graves. And it's quite a big church graveyard, even though it's quite a small town. The church had been there for like 500-600 years. I went to try and find those graveyards again to show my friends a week later. Do you think I could find them? Couldn't find them. And it took me ages to find. It was weird. It was almost like I was directed to them, and then I subsequently found out that they had a link to the church in more than just the fact they were, well, they weren't buried there because they were either in France, but their father had created a big stained glass window. He was the reverend excuse me, at the church, and he had created this stained glass window in memoriam for his 2 sons who both died in World War I. But what wasn't lovely is when the church burnt down, the first thing that went was this stained glass window. It popped. It was the first thing that popped. And the psychic medium had their Sam Bennett. I hadn't told her any of this, and she said something like, "There's 2 young men who are really upset the fact the window went." And I was a bit sort of like, well, I knew their background because I hadn't told them any of it, and I knew these 2 young, and she actually did, and I hadn't told them anything that this grave, I'd found it, and she said one of the young men, he directed you to the grave because he wanted you to know his story, and I must admit that kind of thing was a bit like, what?
It's a bit goosebumpy, isn't it? Yeah.
It was flattering though that he wanted me to be able to talk about him. It did scare me in that respect, but it was a bit of a, how did you know that? Because I didn't tell you. But yeah, I don't find, I actually have this weird thing, and I've got my husband doing it now as well, is that as I walk around, when I say the people's names, I talk to them as I walk around, almost as a respect.
Yeah.
But then again, most people know I'm a bit weird. My 7-year-old turned around to me the other day and he said, "Mummy, are you a bit weird?" And I went, "I am a bit, yes." And he goes, "Well, I want to be a bit weird too." And I went, "Good for you, go for it."
That's lovely.
I don't think there's anything wrong with it, being a bit. And he said it to his dad, and his dad turned around and, "I think a bit weird's be good, be different, don't be worried about it." So yeah. I also think it's great that you delved into the Gothic sort of thing, and that's where the Victoriana came from, because I do know an awful lot of Gothics when I was younger who it was more just the look they were interested in. They weren't interested in the background of the look, and that's probably your researcher background, your researcher sort of thing that you want to know. Obviously the Victorians had very, very interesting mourning habits.
Yes.
And one of those was the whole jewellery aspect that you on the mourning jewellery. Now, when I was looking into this, I did discover that it wasn't just the Victorians who did it. It was actually come about 200-300 years beforehand with Charles I's followers had mourning jewellery.
Yeah. I mean, when I think mourning wear as a whole has been around for centuries, and then a lot of materials that now we regard as mourning mourning materials, things like jet, have far more exciting roots than we really give them credit for. But yeah, when I think from like Charles I, when it came as a sign of mourning and showing your support as a royalist, the kind of timeline and the life cycle of mourning jewellery kind of became incredibly, it started for the elite, and it was very much a rich person's game. And I really like that by the 19th century, or at least by kind of, the beginning of the 19th, late 18th century, it was becoming far more accessible to all classes. And I think that's when you go from being a historian and appreciator of the upper classes and the royalty, and you go to being a full breadth social historian. But yeah, some early mourning and some early Georgian mourning wear, mourning jewellery is just, it's stunning and elaborate, but it's also completely mad, and it lacks a lot of the finesse of the Victorian symbolism, where everything becomes quite homogenized and beautiful. And so, as you say, you get these beautiful like Stuart slides that are, tiny skeletons behind big wedges of crystal, and everything just looks a bit like mad Disney. I think it's really wonderful. It's a beautiful thing to see. Sadly, I don't have anything like that in my own collection, but mourning jewellery is, I think it's very often just dismissed as like a spooky trinket rather than something that's very culturally and artistically important. Definitely.
Why do you, whenever you mention to someone, and I've not so much in our field, in the paranormal field, to be honest, in the paranormal field, they're a bit like, not blasé about it, but not quite as freaked out as people are dealing with this on a regular basis. But if I sort of said, if I was wearing a pendant and someone said, "Pretty, where's that from?" I said, "Oh, it's a Victorian piece of mourning Whitby jet." I love Whitby jet. I do. And I know that there's a heritage centre in Whitby, the Whitby Jet Heritage Centre, where you can go and see how they would have made the jewellery and learn more.
Yeah, there's a few in Whitby now. There's there's the old one that's like set up like an old jet worker's bench. And then just down the road, I think all on the same road, you've got the bench one, which I don't think is an original setup. I think that was created, I think, in the 20th century, maybe the 70s. But it's set up like a Victorian workshop. And then you've got the W. Hammond Museum of Whitby Jet, which is, I think, the newest of all of them. And that's got huge display cabinets, a phenomenal collection, really stunning. And they've got jet workers' tools. And then opposite, there's the Ebor Jet Works, which has a little museum where you can see the artists there making the jet. Same with W. Hammond, you can as well. And at the far end of Whitby as well, there's the Panet Park Museum, where they've got kind of an older collection of jet as well. So whichever end of Whitby you're at, it's a bit like, you know, London with rats. You know, you're never more than, you know, 10 meters from a piece of Victorian mourning jewellery. It's brilliant.
I'm not sure the Whitby Tourist Association like the comparison.
Yeah, maybe they won't go for that tagline. But I know some absolutely fantastic jet workers in Whitby.
They're just the best fish and chips I've ever had was from Whitby.
You see, they've got everything. You know, spend all your money on a very elaborate piece of jewellery, and then with your last fiver, get some scampi.
Oh,
and everyone's happy.
Best ever. And I must admit, the Abbey is what that's another place I can just sit there and just, no matter what the weather, I mean, I love Yorkshire anyway, but no matter what the weather, I can just sit there and just chill. I just find it very, whereas a lot of people find it very spooky and the Bram Stoker links and everything else. Again, I just find it a very relaxing, chilled out.
It's just beautiful, really, isn't it? It's a really beautiful place.
But that's interesting. I mean, we say about the Whitby Jet jewellery. Do you think, Whitby is so associated with Gothic and Victoriana and everything else. In your research, do you think that is because of the jet coming from there almost, or is it to do with the Bram Stoker thing, or
the Gothic link?
Yeah.
Well, the Gothic link really, as we know it today, you know, the Whitby Goth Weekend is kind of Whitby Goth Weekend has changed a lot over the last decade or so, but the direct link, I mean, I think goths have always visited there because of the Abbey, because it's dramatic, it fits into the whole, you know, Victorian crumbling, ruined, you know, crumbling domestic space sort of trope. But the tight goth link as it is today didn't really come about till about, I think, 94, when a lady called Jo Hampshire, who runs the original Whitby Goth Weekend, sort of organised a gathering of pen pals that she'd met. I think it was through NME or Sounds or something like that. Right. And then a lot of goths, more than anyone really anticipated, descended on Whitby and a pub called the Elsinore in particular. And then it became, when are we doing this again? And then it just kept going and going. And then it was twice a year, and then it kept growing. And then there were, you know, bands and huge events every April and October. And so it's grown from that. And so I think since the festival's grown and like a wider knowledge of the festival from people who aren't involved in the goth subculture, you know, as that's passed through the media, that's become more solidified. And so before, when maybe pre-94, there might not be a goth shop in Whitby, because of course not. It's a tiny seaside town. There's not going to be a lot of goths. I mean, there are now a lot of goths going sort of retire to the seaside, but that link really just hardened, I think, since the 90s.
I mean, I first
definitely aided
when I was 14, so mid 80s, and even then it had that Gothic kind of, and like I say, I think it's because of the Abbey, it had that Gothic sort of. But it's interesting that it is where the jet came from, yet it's also now morphed into being a Gothic pilgrimage.
Yeah, I suppose the Dracula link is always going to help from some aspect as well, definitely.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So we've got this beautiful jewellery being made. It, as you say, it's becoming more accessible to the general public because it's cheaper, and it's you know, it's not got so much precious metals being involved. I mean, they'll say it's cheap, but they did use black enamel as well, didn't they? Onyx, and I think they used a type of black glass in France.
Yeah, well, with jet, if it's hard to know where to start with jet, because it's a natural gemstone, basically. It's one of the oldest British craft products in the world, you know, like in the world, one of the oldest British craft products aside from flint. Yeah. And so it was mined out of the cliffs at Whitby for centuries, because essentially it's a fossilized wood. Yeah. That was washed out, compressed, about 180 million years ago. So it's like Jurassic. And there was always an appeal for jet because it's a quality gemstone, it's beautiful, it can be dull and matte, or it can be really highly polished. But when, upon the death of George IV, the Lord Chamberlain's office issued a decree that the ornament in mourning will be jet. And so that's really when the jet workshops of Whitby kind of fired up into production. So it was always a cottage industry, but then suddenly loads of these businesses started up in Whitby and became pretty instantly viable financially. And then when it was always popular, but then when Victoria went into mourning on the death of Prince Albert in 1861, that's when everything kind of went up a notch even more. So you've got the high quality British gemstone. In her mourning, Victoria exclusively wore Whitby jet until quite near the end of her reign, when, following a petition,
she had silver, didn't she?
She wore, I think it was one silver brooch after. It would have been something daft, like 30 years of only wearing jet and onyx. So yeah, when that kicked in, then you'd have the very high end jewelers, people like, there's a man called Isaac Greenbury, who was kind of a superstar of the jet world, and there was another man by the name of Speedy. And when you could mine jet, you can't anymore because of coastal erosion, you get these very early Victorian big chunky pieces of jewellery that are utter works of art. They're phenomenal, and they were worn interchangeably as fashion or as mourning pieces. But of course, it's the mourning pieces we know more. But jet was also, it was a big tourist trade. So tiny little collar brooches that look a little bit like bullets. They were incredibly popular. They were the most affordable, really. And you'd see men with little tables of wares on street corners in Whitby, waiting for fashionable women and passing tourists to go by. But a lot of what seems to be happening at the minute, not negatively, not to put this on anyone, but a lot of jet, regardless of its purpose, if it's clearly just decorative or if it has got a big great in memory of on it, is seen as mourning, and is therefore seen as spooky and potentially haunted and all the rest of it. Whereas obviously I sometimes have to submit to my cliche. The mourning aspect of it is a big draw for me, but just because it isn't mourning doesn't mean, as you know, as people who appreciate good work, good art, good jewelry, that we can't appreciate the multitudes of jet that aren't anything associated with death. But jet was, as you said, jet was never cheap, but it was certainly probably a hell of a lot cheaper than loads of gold and all the rest of it.
Yeah, diamonds and emeralds and rubies and else. Yeah,
a lot of simulants came out when the jet trade was really at its peak, to try and make things even more affordable. It was affordability and how quickly these things could be produced. Because if you're hand carving jet, you know, without electric tools and things like that, a lot of jet workers, their tools for carving amazing cameos and things like that were things like an umbrella spoke. You know, just so rudimentary, but they create these beautiful things. But if you wanted, you know, say a cameo, but that was so far out of your price range, that's when we get things like vulcanite, which is invented by Goodyear, the tire people.
Oh.
Yeah, and that's a kind of rubber which is heated with sulfur.
Okay.
And then it can be used in molds, so then it could be produced really, really quickly. You get things like you said, glass French jet, which you get that really beautiful bright shine on it, but it is glass. You get things like bog oak, which wasn't ever used for mourning, but is quite commonly conflated with mourning nowadays, which was really just possibly the most self-explanatory of them all. It's bog oak. There's not really that far you can go from that. That was mainly an Irish tourist piece, but again is sold today as mourning wear, because a lot of these Irish pieces in particular depicted castles and abbeys. And so if you're selling them today, they're going, oh no, it's Whitby jet because it's depicting the abbey, when really it's, you know, like a ruin in Limerick or something that's got absolutely nothing to do with grief. And
those brooches you were mentioning, I was looking on eBay for sort of jewellery to see what, and there's an awful lot of those brooches, like the black, and they do look like jet, Whitby jet as well. Yeah, but it's the fact, like you say, anything that's like black is classed as mourning jewellery, whereas I remember going to museums and seeing beautiful sort of drop earrings, Victorian earrings, that are black jet, and they've got nothing to do, they were just fashionable. It was a fashionable colour to have jewellery made out of. The symbolism on the mourning jewellery was the interesting thing. But the other thing as well that I didn't know until I started researching this was that there was periods of mourning during the Victorian time, very, very strongly adhered to, and you know, you could lose your place in society almost if you didn't adhere to the mourning. And of course, the women who had the heaviest mourning periods if they lost their husband, but they couldn't start wearing the jewelry straight away.
No, but I think this is where in deepest mourning, you basically had to look, you weren't even allowed pretty black fabrics. You know, you had to wear crepe and bombazine, that these really non-reflective, scratchy fabrics. And crepe, it was loathed. It was really loathed. And it was like a heavy edging that you had to put on all of your clothing. You weren't really afforded any luxuries of fashion or jewellery in earliest mourning. And I think, like, when we look at most periods of history, this is mainly focused on women, you know, because men, when they were in mourning, I mean, when we're talking middle classes and up, their workwear was a black suit, so they wouldn't have to do much by way of changing their appearance, but their accessories would be maybe a black crepe hat band or an armband or something like that. Whereas, you know, with the stages of mourning for women that were laid out in ladies' magazines from the top down, it's like that sketch from the Frost Report, you know, John Cleese and the two Ronnies, where all classes, like, I look up to him, I look down on him, I know my place. It's like that mourning was like that. So when the upper classes went into deepest mourning, the middle classes, to seem closer to the upper classes, took on their grief and grieved as much as them. And then the lower classes kind of did what they could. But it becomes kind of all permeating. But jet, I think, especially was particularly popular with people that could afford it, because it could bend the rules, because you could get unpolished jet that was matte, because that was a big thing with early stages of mourning. You couldn't have anything reflective, so certainly not any gold or silver. But with jet, and not French jet, obviously, because that's very shiny, it didn't reflect the light, so you could still sort of a bit of dressing up and a bit of treating yourself in this horrible time, presuming that you were mourning and you didn't hate whoever had died.
That wasn't me that lost my husband. That was my evil twin. I'm allowed to leave the house. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, I'm off to a ball. Sorry, but
I'm on the bull.
But yeah, jet was really handy like that, because it could be matte, and then when you went into the next stage of mourning, where you could wear more shiny things, or if you could move up into different colours like purples and mauves, you could then get it polished. And then you could have this really beautiful piece, keep your investment all the way through it, and it would look stunning, particularly in candlelight. Jet is just perfect in candlelight.
I've got the jet jewellery that my parents have been to Whitby, because they know I love it so much. So
it's stunning. It really is. And when it glints in candlelight, there's nothing like it.
So would they have been allowed to keep a wedding ring on?
I think wedding rings, as far as I know, were okay.
Yeah. But no, just types of flamboyant or any type. I'm just thinking that, obviously, because the wedding ring, I mean, men didn't tend to wear wedding rings much. It would have been women who wore the wedding ring. And I just wondered if she'd have been able to, because it does seem to be the most restrictive on the women. You know, they weren't allowed, wasn't it for something like 2 years, they weren't allowed to, be attractive, basically. They weren't allowed to potentially attract a new husband, or think about how many of them relied on the man to earn a living. It was particularly, must have been pretty destitute if they weren't allowed to remarry for some time.
It was quite interesting, really, because obviously these guidelines, they change and they shifted. I mean, the Victorian era as we know it was kind of 1837 to 1901. So things do shift and change a lot, but generally it was, let's just say 2 years for widows. So a woman losing a husband was the ultimate in grief, and you're kind of stuck. For a year and a day, you're not really allowed anything at all apart from this horrible crepe and bombazine. And then you can move on a little bit more, but you're still very outwardly marked, and you weren't allowed to, go out and do a lot of social things. You were very much just in a hutch, and you had to kind of embrace, in the darkest term, embrace your fate for that period of time. But again, I think that was far more, impacted the middle and upper classes far more, because then they didn't especially have the freedom of, well, I can be in mourning, but I have to go out to work, so at least I can still see people. So it's kind of a strange duality there. But as with marriage and remarrying, I find it really interesting that there doesn't seem to be any really strict guidelines on a widow remarrying. I haven't found an awful lot of that thus far, but widowers could remarry the second their wife was in the ground.
Yeah.
But it was seen as only proper for the new wife to go into mourning for the wife that predeceased her.
Really?
Yes. Which I think is kind of, it says so much about, I'm not sure if privilege is the right word, because this whole social construct of mourning, where it's quite an odd thing to apply to any area of society. But yeah, there are certain guidelines that say it's, people didn't obviously always adhere to these, but there are suggested guidelines that it was only proper for the new wife to mourn the one that came before her, which is, can't say I'd be a fan of getting on with that.
Necessity. I know. Well, it wasn't. It would have been 1924, 25. I think my great grandmother, her husband died quite suddenly, left her destitute. She nearly went in the workhouse, but ended up getting a job as a live-in housekeeper to a guy who'd lost his wife a couple of years before, and they ended up getting married and having 2 more children themselves. So it wasn't a necessity to do that, but yeah, I don't think I'd be too chuffed if I met someone and they said, oh, by the way, you've got to now wear, well, I wear black a lot anyway, but you've got to wear the mask and everything, the veil, the widow's hood or something, wasn't it called? Was it called a widow's hood? Something like the veil over your face. I don't know if I'd be too chuffed.
No.
Because I'd married a widower.
No.
But jet wasn't the only thing that was used. They used hair.
Now, I love hair so much.
Oh. I said to you before we started recording, it makes my fingernails itch. I think it's, I'll put some photos on Haunted Histories of some of the hair pieces, and it is amazingly beautiful, intricate work. And it survives to this day, doesn't it? You've got
loads.
Personal collection.
Yeah, I have. It's I always find a great way to really endear yourself to people is to go, hey, let me tell you about my collection of strangers' hair. So, but I love it. I really love it, and I can appreciate, like when you say it makes your fingernails itch. It's so normalized to me because everything in my living room is pretty much death related. I have mourning notices on the walls. As I said, I've got grave decorations behind me.
Well, that doesn't bother me.
It's
I'd have that myself.
It's the hair aspect. But I have a lot of framed hair works and things like that. But with hair, there's a weird crossover with it, because there's the artistic aspect, which you said you can appreciate, even though it makes you want to throw it out a window. It was an amazing art form, a really, really talented art form. But also it was for mourning, but it was also primarily a big sentimental thing. So again, like we've said before, a lot of things that are listed online today or are presented even in museums. I've seen plenty in museums that say this is mourning wear, and it's just not. There's just hair involved. So with a lot of hair work, it was just a matter of people exchanging locks of hair as lovers or as friends, family. I've got hair wreaths that are made from all different hair from a family that were made by the girls, and it was mainly girls, on evenings, when there wasn't really much else to do. But a lot of sentimental hair work is very elaborately woven hair that's then placed into brooches. That's what's most common, really, is woven hair behind brooches, or sculpted hair where it looks like it's in feathers. But unless they're in a setting that says, you know, in memory of, or if you've got black enamel or seed pearls, because seed pearls were very popular from, I think, really the Georgian period onwards. These very, very tiny pearls they kind of became synonymous with tears. So they're very popular in mourning jewellery. But no, a lot of this sentimental hair, it's kind of the most common, the equivalent of the bar brooches. But there are also so many artists that would weave hair into big chunky bracelets, into fob chains, into actual necklaces, really elaborate, really beautiful things. But yeah, I think because it's so human, and it is, and it doesn't decay. You know, as you say, I've got a cabinet. It doesn't degrade over time. I've got a stack of woven bracelets that are from different people's hair that are all 19th century, and they look as crisp and as clean as the day they were woven.
Do you wear them, or are they displayed?
Oh no, I don't, because I'd be terrified of snagging them. And as gross as some people might find hair, they're to get a good quality woven bracelet, you will have like gold fittings and things like that, and they're really expensive. So if anyone's listening and knows where I live, please don't rob me. I don't have insurance.
She's in Taunton in Devon.
Yes, Taunton. I'm Queen of Taunton.
Queen of Taunton, yeah.
Come and see my hair. But yeah, it seems to be the most visceral, really, of mourning things, because it is something that we really associate and we see as dirty in a way, which even in the 40s, there was quite a famous exhibition that in kind of like the foreword to the exhibition dismissed the idea of keeping hair and displaying and wearing hair as something very macabre and almost kind of uncivilized, whereas it was just another way of showing your friendship and your love and your loss of someone, you know. And if just from a mourning perspective, to have something tangible of someone who had died was a privilege and a treat, really. And especially if, you know, someone had died and they died of something quite diseases that we fortunately don't really have to encounter nowadays, that changed their appearance and they didn't see themselves when they died. At least that hair would be one kind of consistent from the whole relationship. So I really like that it's that people who wore these things and had these things would have like literally a part of that other person with them. I think it's, even when you look at the death as well, it's quite a romantic sentiment behind it all. But yeah, it was a huge industry that
well, you mentioned diseases that, I mean, one of the families that I always think of that got wiped out by a horrible disease that unfortunately is making a comeback now, is TB. It's Brontes. And I found pictures of a bracelet that was made, I think it's got an amethyst in the centre of Emily and Anne's hair. I think their sisters commissioned it so that she could remember two of her sisters. I mean, the fact that family got absolutely wiped out by TB, basically, which families did because of how contagious it was and how close settings they lived in. And that, I mean, the Brontes, I love their work. And I think I said to you, Wuthering Heights is one of my favourite books of all time. And so to find that link to the talk we were doing today, but I mean, that bracelet is beautiful. It's beautiful, but it's, I think it just makes the thought of hair on my skin just makes my skin itch.
Because you think it's going to be prickly, or something like that. It's not. It honestly feels just like any other woven fibre.
Really?
Yeah, it's very strong. Hair can take a lot more than we think it does. What
the tension thing is on it, but I mean, even the thing is though, even now you can get bracelets made of your horse's hair. If your horse dies, they'll tell you to clip with the tail, and they'll make bracelets. So it's not unusual. And I suppose even now the current thing is to have jewelry made out of a person's ashes or animals' ashes as a remembrance. So mourning jewelry is still around.
Absolutely. And there are still specialists who do this, the amazing, what's called palette work, when it's hair that's been sort of sculpted into shape, put into shapes. Palette work, weaving, I mean, they are few and far between. But if you did see, a beautiful piece of Victorian hair work and thought, oh, if only that was around today.
Yeah,
it is.
There is someone who can do it.
Yeah, I know someone, there's a lady called Courtney Lane over in the States who is a phenomenal hair work artist, and she uses traditional Victorian techniques.
Oh, wow.
And she has these weaving tables with little weights, and she can weave bracelets just like they did centuries ago. She specializes a lot in Swedish hair work, which heavily influenced all of America and Europe's styles. Like, I think Queen Victoria's personal hair artist was a Swedish woman from this tiny village in Sweden.
Amazing.
Who specialized in hair work.
I can understand it. I can understand wanting, to hold. Like I said to you, I never did it when my children were little. Like, have the lock of the hair in a locket and that sort of thing. I didn't really. It didn't appeal to me, but I can understand why it would. But one of the, obviously this is quasi paranormal show. It's not just it's paranormal as well. Most people, I think, would think that mourning jewellery was haunted. Mourning jewellery is possessed. You've got so much of it in your house in Taunton that you've got so much of it down there that you must have things going bump in the night frequently.
Oh, it's like The Exorcist in here. Honestly, it's unbearable.
In all honesty, is it? Or is it you knocking into something because you forgot to turn the light on? I mean, do you find it active because you've got things associated with death?
So I always feel like this is such an anticlimax when I say, I love mourning, I love the paranormal, and then they should come together in this beautiful sort of stone tape theory thing of, people have worn mourning jewellery, they're so sad, and ghosts, But as I said, I've got mourning cards, I've got hair, I've got jet, I've got so much around me. And I feel very safe and very comforted by it. But there's kind of a caveat to that. The only piece of jewellery that I've ever felt a bit uneasy around, and I don't want to say that, it's because it's possessed by this person or so on and so forth. It wasn't even a jet piece. I bought one of my first ever pieces of Victorian jewellery, not even mourning jewellery. It was a vulcanite cameo, just a little brooch. And then I thought it was beautiful. I couldn't really afford jet at the time. But then when I got it home, it felt like there was something attached, like there was something watching me. And I'm fully happy to accept that was just me projecting onto it. That, I didn't have a great collection at the time and I was a bit uneasy about it. But that was possibly the only piece that I didn't keep in the room. Just because it felt a bit odd. But now it's next to me. And I feel perfectly comfortable with that.
You see, this I actually contacted Neil and Jane from the Haunted Antiques Paranormal Research Centre, because they're one of my go-tos for items to see, because they get so many things given to them that people are being freaked out about or they think is haunted or whatever. And I actually did say, have you got any jewellery? Have you got any haunted jewellery? And Neil's answer was no. He said the only thing they've got that she could think of off the top of her head is, I think she said it was a silver bracelet that is being worn by one of the dolls as a necklace that she's picked stuff up from. But and her and I were getting into a conversation about mourning jewellery compared to just normal decorative or personal jewellery, like a wedding ring or a necklace you were given for your 18th, that kind of thing. And she said in her experience, mourning jewellery very rarely carries anything. It's almost like it's almost like we were saying about graveyards being inactive. It's peaceful. It's just whereas a piece of jewellery that you were given as a young child or that you wore for 30 years and absolutely adored or whatever, that kind of thing she said that in her experience that carries more energy than the mourning jewellery. I'm also of the belief when you find, for want of a term, secondhand jewellery that you're really attracted to, there is something driving you that almost wants you to buy it.
Yeah.
I'm a very big believer in that. I remember once there was a necklace in an antique shop and I couldn't afford it that day, and the guy said nobody would buy it. He said people just walk straight past it, and I think I did end up buying it when I finally saved up enough money. But he said it amazed him. It was such a pretty piece, nobody was interested in it, and I almost wonder if destiny. I think it was a turn of the 20th century piece, like sort of 1910, 1915, something like that. And he said it was almost like it was repelling people. I didn't tell him that I thought maybe I was destined to buy it, but he said, oh, it's weird. Nobody else expressed an interest in it. They've walked straight, no matter where I've shown it to try and get people to buy it, they've just walked straight past it. So what do you think about that? Do you think that possibly something is almost guiding you? Or if something is guiding you, what is guiding you to have all this talk about mourning jewellery and the history behind it, and try and sort of stop it being seen as being morbid?
I think I like the idea that I'm being kind of divinely or supernaturally being led to things. I'm not sure if I could apply that to myself, but I really like that. I definitely feel like I'm a custodian of these pieces, and the way I feel about it, I'm very conscious of it not sounding a bit uppity, because again, having any collection of anything antique is a privilege in itself.
Definitely, yeah.
But yeah, I feel that through collecting these things and learning about them and educating myself and correcting myself, I'm learning new things all the time, as we all are. But then having that ability to then say, okay, this place will let me have a lecture. If, I've done some really lectures in cemeteries even, and people have brought their pieces to show me, to say, is this mourning? What is this? I don't, little hair brooches and things. And I find that engagement with other people, and like you say, the dispelling of myths, that any kind of mourning piece and any sentimental piece, it comes from the same place. It comes from, in principle, it comes from love.
Yeah.
And so why would we deter ourselves from being around something with such a beautiful sentiment to art, when it's great craftsmanship, it's antique, it's socially important? They're things that we should celebrate, not hide in a drawer that are, oh, granny left us this, but it's weird and it's haunted. I quite like the idea of that. Maybe if someone read something of mine or heard me prattling on about the joys of hair, they might retake that out and say, no, I'm going to wear this because it was my granny's, not my granny was weird, it was death related. I think if we kind of change our mentality with how we associate with these and how we interact with antique and mourning items as a whole, we can give them a second life and give them kind of the respect that they deserve. Because it is such a shame to have beautiful things in houses and almost be ashamed to have them and not know what to do with them, because maybe you might incorrectly associate something quite unpleasant with them when that's not there at the root.
Is that, though, also when did this, do you know, try and think how to word this question, do you know when this attitude towards death and mourning jewelry changed? Because I know more about the World War I side of things and how people cope with death, and I know that that the whole sort of the Victorian mourning rituals didn't stop exactly on Victoria's death in 1901. They did for a little bit of time, but in World War I, that kind of, you go into mourning for 2 years if you've lost your husband, stopped happening because it couldn't, because there was so much death and of young people, young men, and young women as well, because we die in World War I. And the kind of mourning side there was sweetheart brooches and those kind of things. Or if your husband died, you might get sent home his regimental badge to wear. I've seen some turned into necklaces and things like that as their way of mourning. But even though you had the upsurge in the spiritualist movement during then, people they didn't treat death the way we seem to treat it in modern society now. The fact that if you were still mourning for someone after 5 years, you weren't told, oh, pull yourself together, they're dead. You were allowed to mourn for as long as you needed too. And that was one of the things about the Victorian side, that death was inevitable. Obviously, mortality rates were high. Child mortality was terrifyingly high.
Yeah.
And they would have, they knew that the worst thing possible was to have a pauper's funeral. So there would be sort of funeral clubs, or they seemed to be better prepared for it and more accepting of it, and not quite so scared of it, even though it was more likely to happen at a time when we wouldn't expect it now. They weren't as scared of it because it was commonplace. So when did this attitude towards mourning jewellery and almost being scared of it, when did that start?
I think you've kind of got it with World War One. It was very gradual. Like you said, there wasn't just a Victoria's dead, bang, now we're all happy. There were loads of different, not just social changes, but a lot of, especially with the jewellery, with like financial changes and things that came with like industrialization. So from a jewellery perspective, I think there was a big discovery of silver in the States. There was like a Comstock
load.
Yeah. And he also relates to spiritualism and obscenity laws, but that's another day.
Does he?
Yes, Victoria Woodhull, I think, annoyed him and then pushed through some obscenity laws. But yes, with the availability of like a cheaper, I think it's the right Comstock. It was definitely a Comstock.
Okay.
There came this wide availability of stamped silver brooches, really cheaply made, mainly Birmingham stamped silver brooches. So again, a lot of like the intricacies and the indulgences of not just grief but sentimentality really became cross class, So, but with wartime, as you say, there was death on such a massive scale, just from a practical perspective, from funerals and things like that. There were still big elaborate funerals and so forth, but not exactly to the same extent, mainly because the availability of materials, the availability of men, things like that all started to factor into things. But also there were different tastes changing. So it's a bit like minimalism today, things like that. So what was once appropriate and admirable, desirable about upper class funerals and all the pomp and circumstance that had been around since really the Georgian period, when you have mutes and feathermen and all this stuff, it went from being this beautiful thing that you'd want to mimic to then being quite tacky, for want of a better word. And so the trend came that the higher classes would kind of scale down certain aspects of their grief so as not to seem over the top, because, as I said before, with like the Frost Report, people mimicking each other's classes. The lower classes, especially, a lot were documented in the East End at the time, that were documented quite disparagingly, again, which was quite a classist approach. But these funerals were getting more and more elaborate and larger, and then were kind of encroaching on the upper classes' style of grief, I suppose. So then things started flipping.
We see that now when you get travellers' funerals, when you get hundreds of them turning up, and you've got the horse-drawn hearse, and have the feathers, and you do get sort of, even you get it now. You get this sort of upper classes, looking down their nose at this sort of ostentatious behaviour.
Exactly. It's always been that. It's like what the trends are set, and then when other people that can catch up or can financially catch up, there's nothing to distance them anymore. So then it starts to fade out. So I think there definitely was the aspect, that was the jewelry aspect, and there was the funeral aspect. As you say, death on an enormous scale. It wasn't especially feasible to keep doing this all the time. And after Victoria's reign and her ideas of mourning being like whole generations, like mothers and daughters were growing up, because Victoria mourned for 40 years. They were growing up with the same regimented rules around them, that when different like fabrics became unfeasible to have anymore, and hemlines changed, things like that, that's when finally, visually, things started to change and fade out. And I think that's where we get more of a change to sentimentality and more of a focus on that and remembrance, just as a culture, that things really started to fade out. And then just practically, when we get to grief and burial, if you go around cemeteries, you'll find enormous obelisks and huge memorials.
Yeah.
But you won't really find them past a certain time.
Yeah.
And that'll be because, you know, again, as you know, like war, availability of things, wastage was a huge aspect of things, but also everyone's good old favourite health and safety. So a lot of practices just weren't, not that they weren't safe anymore, they were never safe. And we finally just acknowledged it. So, you know, you won't have these huge obelisks because it's not particularly safe if they're just, you know, rushed up and they're unsteady, and then they'll fall over and crush little Johnny as he's running through the cemetery. You know, there's so many different aspects that fed into it. But
I think it's almost a shame though that I mean, you know, the way we again, this is paranormal. I'm a paranormal person, but I think it's a shame how we've Hollywoodized death, that, you know, that we do say to someone, oh, you've been mourning for 12 months, come off, get over it, you don't need that long. You know, I lost my sister 20 plus years ago. I still miss her. I still have days when I cry. I still have things that make me remember 20 odd years on. So I don't, and whereas the Victorians wouldn't have found that weird, they would have almost understood why I still miss someone 20 odd years later. You know, I find now if I talk to people who haven't maybe gone through it actually, no, that's the thing, but the people who sort of say pull yourself together, it's been however many years, are normally the ones who haven't lost someone close to them. They might have had a great uncle or a great grandmother or something, but they've never lost anyone like the spouse or a sibling or a child or a partner. Whereas obviously in the Victorian era, it was so common for that to have happened to you. Most families, when you look at the census records, they will have lost at least one child before that reached 5 years old. You know, it wasn't uncommon for one of the spouses to die before the age of 45, you know, that kind of thing. But I do think a lot of this, and I say I joke about the hair making my fingernails itch. Like I say, anyone looking at, I will put some pictures up on Haunted Histories of it, because it is stunning work. I mean, the intricacy in the bracelets, like this Bronte, it is beautiful, but I don't think you're going to convince me to wear it.
I'll work on you.
I might, if I had a display cabinet, I might have some in it, but to wear it, I'll stick to silver. I'll stick to silver. I like my silver stuff. Although it wouldn't bother me wearing something that had been created to commemorate a person's life, or it had been created as almost like memento mori, which I love what that actually means. I don't think a lot of people know what memento mori. It's remember we all die, isn't it? Isn't that what
it's remember you're going to die?
Yeah. Whereas most people think it's a momentum of, you know, I originally, when I first read that, thought it meant it's a memento of a person's death, and it's not. It's to say, remember this, it's going to happen to you. You know, this you will, and we haven't even touched on, I mean, you've written a great blog on grave dolls. Another that I think is a bit weird. Not the blog, the concept of these dolls. But then again, I understand death photography in that time period. I understand why people do that. As gory as it might seem, it's very logical.
Again, it's beautiful again, though, isn't it? It comes from a place of love and a case of remembrance. But I think you're right. We don't, like, now we have this big sort of barrier that comes down, that death is something, I think, because we don't practically deal with death, maybe in ways that maybe our ancestors would have done. So if we're with someone when they die, if in hospital, at home or anything, that is a bit of a rarity, I think, to actually be with someone at the point of death sometimes. But we certainly don't deal with, the washing of the body, the preparation for burial. So we have a far greater kind of removal of the practicalities of death. And I think that certainly, will influence people's maybe unfeelingness, inadvertent unfeelingness sometimes with time periods and repeated and reoccurring mourning. Definitely.
I think you're right. There's a big psychological thing in it. Anything to do with freak speech scares people, a lot of people. Having seen it firsthand, and I was actually with my sister, it doesn't scare me as much as some, which is why handling a piece of, for want of a better term, death jewellery wouldn't faze me at all. The only thing with death that scares me is leaving my children when they're still children. That's the only thing about it that concerns me. But the thought of it doesn't bother me talking about it. It doesn't bother me, looking into it, different sort of ways of dealing with it. And I also I would put death jewelry in the same thing as, let's say, as a graveyard or a cemetery. Just because it's to do with death doesn't mean it's going to be spooky. Doesn't mean it's appreciate the craftsmanship in all these things.
Yeah, absolutely. You walk through a display of Victorian mourning jewellery, and you can walk through a Victorian cemetery, and you'll see the same symbols mimicked across both of them.
Yeah.
So there's so much depth to both sides of these things that are both, love and faith. Yeah, all over the place. Yeah,
symbols though. I mean, that's a show in its own right. Talking about all the different symbols.
Oh, completely. Yeah. Used in.
I do like the wasn't it cross swords for someone who died in battle. You had the Catherine wheel for showing the Christian faith and things like that. I mean, it's symbolism is. But then again, they used symbolism a lot in the Victorian era because so many people were illiterate, and it was a way of communicating without reading. They used it. I'm talking about one of my favourite subjects, the workhouse. You can go to some old work. It is true. Some old workhouses, and if you look with wall where the like the vagrants would have queued up to have their 24, 48 hours, you can see loads of things carved into the wall, and people think it's just graffiti. Modern day, it's not. It was the vagrants leaving symbols so that other vagrants would know what you could get from that particular. So symbolism is rife in the Victorian industry.
Yeah, there's whole books on the symbolism of flowers.
Yeah,
symbolism of jewelry within sweetheart brooches, symbolism of stones rather. So different gemstones and different permutations would mean different things. And then before that, you've got the ultimate in sort of romantic, shall we say, suggestion when you get Georgian lover's eye brooches, where that you'd have the eye of your lover or your mistress.
They are freaky. Those pictures of those brooches are. They're freakier than the hair.
Oh, really? Oh, I love them. Yeah. I've got a little replica myself. I think they're incredibly. I don't know. I quite like the secrecy of romance to it all.
I find those. I couldn't wear a brooch of an eye. I just.
Well, it's not a real eye. It's just a painting. Should clarify to the listeners. No, we're really talking about promise.
Yeah, they don't gouge the eye out of the person they're.
There you go. Oh, darling, I'll always remember you now.
I think I find those a bit weirder than the hair.
All right, okay, that's interesting.
But yeah, I just feel like I don't like feeling like I'm being watched. Yeah, I'm a bit more sort of, don't give me the symbolism if you're attracted to me. Just come and tell me. It's fine. But so I agree with you. I don't think just because they're there to do with death, it means they're haunted or possessed. I mean, there's other things that are meant to be far worse, cursed. When you've got things like the the Hope diamond that for one of the famous people who owned it, Marie Antoinette, and we know what happened to her. You got things.
Yeah, like, she did all right before she got chopped, though. She had a pretty decent life.
It was okay, but it didn't end too well.
Well, no, it ended very abruptly.
Exactly. You got the black Orlov diamond, which is beautiful. The guy who brought it to the US killed himself, and other people who owned it killed themselves. In fact, I think it was that one that the jeweler split it into 4, saying that would break the curse. And there was a famous actress was offered to wear a piece of jewelry with it for the Oscars, and she declined when she found out about the rumors surrounding it. I mean, one of my favorite stories is to do with the King Wenceslas's crown that's at Castle. Do you know this one?
No.
Well, Wenceslas's crown is meant to be stored at Prague Castle, and he put a curse on it that if anyone put it on their head who wasn't worthy of being a king would die. And that's what they believed happened to somebody who it was a descendant of a Nazi. I'm not going to tell too much about this one because this is an article I wrote for Haunted magazine, which they haven't published yet. But I'll tell you off there. But anyway, the son of this Nazi wanted to wear it, so this Nazi bullied Prague Castle into letting him wear it, and he died. And you're meant to die within 12 months of wearing this piece of jewellery, adornment.
Yeah.
But then another one I got told about was somebody I know who was very into sort of SS history, not something I'm particularly in. She'd acquired an SS ring, and these rings were only made for a certain amount of SS officers. And after she acquired it, all this bad stuff started happening to her. And it wasn't until she got rid of the ring that things started improving. So I do believe jewellery can be cursed, whether it's haunted or whether it's, whether it is psychological.
It has a power. It has a power, doesn't it? Even if we remove all paranormal stuff and we just say emotionally, it can trigger things. It's so no wonder that, again, as I said, it's still stone tape sort of theory, isn't it? It's like really intense emotions and something that's with you. It's it's on you while you're feeling this. No wonder that some people feel they can pick up on these things, or that horrible things are happening. Definitely.
Well, that's been fascinating. Thank you so much. I've learned an awful lot. Absolutely fascinated to talk to you, Kate. I really appreciated that.
And you, thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, no, I've enjoyed it. So you can find Kate's work at Burials and Beyond. Facebook, you've got a website as well.
Yeah, I've got main website, burialsandbeyond.com, and then you can find me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, should I say. And I have a Patreon as well, which is essentially a massive exclusive archive of podcasts, videos, articles that are never to be seen on the main site, that are just for patrons.
Cool.
And that's been constantly updated with everything paranormal, weird, deathy, Victorian. I've got everything from talking mongooses through to a guide to cemetery symbolism.
Wow. Okay. Okay. Well, go and check.
Fun place to be.
Go and check that out. I'm sure you agree with me. Kate is absolutely fascinating. As she say, she also writes for Haunted magazine. She's one of the same stable as me of Haunted magazine writers. Anything to do with Victoriana, she is your girl. She is your girl.
Thank you.
And what you guys can't see is she's got some amazing, we were talking about grave decorations. She's got some amazing decorations just behind her that actually do almost look like jewellery. They are so neat. Absolutely beautiful. So I must admit, I'd love to come down to Taunton and see your collection at some point. Because
more than welcome.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Thank you very much. Or was it Devon you live? Was it Devon or was it Kent you live in now? I can't remember where.
I'm constantly on the move. To be honest, this is a caravan, so I'm just going.
Oh, okay. It looks very nice caravan.
Thank you.
So, but yeah, do suspend belief. Do suspend sometimes your superstitions regarding things to do with death and everything, because death doesn't have to mean nasty. Doesn't have to. All right, we do sort of say that spirits are from people who have died, obviously, but not every single one has to have died in a horrible circumstance. And as Kate said, and I agreed with her because I was thinking the same thing, a lot of this jewelry, it comes from a place of love. It doesn't come from a place of gypsy curses and anything else. It's a place of love and a place of remembrance. Same with anything to do with, like you say, the funeral notices and things like that. It's commemorating the love that you had. So make sure you check Kate out. She does do lectures every so often. I think she said she's got some coming up later in the year, and keep an eye on Haunted Histories, because I am going to keep her to sharing her odd blog to keep her, because you guys have already told me how much you enjoy her work. She is in the most recent issue of Haunted magazine, and she is going to have an essay in the new Feminine Macabre volume 2. Volume 1 I was in, volume 2 she, and another good friend of ours, Lorian from the Ghost Book is going to be in. So women are taking over finally. Well, thank you for listening to this episode of Haunted Histories. I hope you enjoyed it. There are other episodes to listen to on the channel. If there's anything in particular you'd like me to do a show on, let me know. Always looking for ideas. But on that note, have a good evening, sleep tight, and don't worry too much about things that go bump in the night.